I'm at a really interesting point in my campaign where there's there's two, maybe three groups of people. There are your habitual coffee drinkers who don't really care about the minor details that goes into coffee because they drink coffee. They adopted coffee into their lifestyle, whether it's Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, or any of these current companies that drink coffee. They drink it already, and they go my route because not only do they want something black owned or they want something direct to consumer. They trust Div. I'm gonna go with Div because I'm already drinking coffee, and if he's selling it and it's at least decent, I'll keep buying it. And then you have your people who are coffee professionals, or just folks who are really into coffee in general, so they understand more terminology than other people do. So I could throw out different methods of extraction, pour overs, and so forth, and skip the entire origin story of coffee because they drink it, they're aware. And then you have your people who have no idea what coffee is in general. They've accepted it as something that everyone drinks. They've accepted it as it's out there. You have some people who say that, hey man, black people don't drink coffee, which is retarded. Or you have people who say, I don't really do it. It's not for me. I like my body to naturally wake itself up, but we'll still drink alcohol. You know what I mean? Or still drink all these other things. And I just think the best way to level that entire playing field and take out all these little confounding variables is to just start at the beginning. And just as that, legend has it, is that in the forest of Ethiopia there was a goat herder, and this goat herder one day was just he was tripping because he saw that his animals were acting weird. When they ate this particular berry that was outside, they were really energetic. They weren't sleeping. They were almost dancing, So from there, he took some of that. I'm sure he drank a little bit. And over time, he noticed a pattern that it wasn't a fluke. When they drank those particular berries, something happened. So he took it to a local monastery and talked to the monks. Think about, and every nucleus of a community is the church, and however you're gonna set laws straight. You got a police precinct, and you got a church, and you got a town. So he takes it to the monk, and he's like, "Yo, buddy, XYZ, my goats are eating this stuff, and they're giddy and they're acting a fool, man. Something's in there. What is this? Is this the devil's work or the Lord's work?" So the monk takes it. The monk drinks it. Come to find out, the monk can sit through hours and hours of long prayer night and day when he drinks this tea or elixir or cup of these berries. And so he's like, oh no, this is a thing. I'm telling everybody, and when it spreads as it would through the church, you're able to just jump to different communities through the central nucleus of it, and it just spreads out. From that point, it spread all over East Africa and the area, all the way up over into the Midwest, to where eventually, just through trade routes in that location, it got a nickname like wine of Arabi. I'm assuming that's a root word of of Arabian nations, or I would hope. I should probably do some more research on that, but they were getting together and people were drinking this black wine. They were sitting down and they were huddling in houses and little sections and honestly like the first coffee houses, coffee dens, and they would spend hours in there playing games and cards and drinking this stuff, and it became just something people were doing outside of just drinking alcohol. From there, you have people everywhere you have colonizers down to people who just make their money off of trading spices and so forth. Come through there and they hear about this black wine that everybody's drinking. They take some back to Europe. Same thing happens. It explodes. Everybody's drinking it. Everybody's into it. To the point to where the church in Europe calls a red flag. They're like, this gotta be of the devil. You know, it's the first. The Catholic Church is like, this got to be the devil. There's no way all these people are as excited about it, loving it, coming together, and wanting to enjoy it. So they try to outlaw it, and the only way to do that is take it to the Pope. The Pope gets in, he's like, nah, y'all crazy. This fire. You know what I mean? This a thing. And so with his cosign, you start to see more and more houses in London and all through the major cities in Europe, and it already spread from where it was in East Africa. So now this is a real thing. This is like coffee is something that everybody wants their hands on, and it went from just being, you know, the wine of Arabi in that area to just being, you know, straight up the beverage coffee. And you know, and of course coming to the Americas when the teenagers of Europe decided to come to the Americas and stake their claim. But I don't feel like that's just the first place to start, is understanding, you know, how someone stumbled upon it, and that it was in Africa. It was a black man that was out there and noticed that his goats was tripping, and word spread. Legend has it. But regardless of who found it, I just know it came from East Africa. And who lives in East Africa but Africans. We're just going off facts. But into the specifics. You have a berry. You plant it. 2 to 3 months later, it starts to sprout and grow leaves. Like wine grapes and certain fruits, it takes about like 3 years for it to mature, go, you know, sprout a little fruit, go dormant, come back, and really be where it needs to be. About 3 years until the plant is mature enough to actually start harvesting these fruits from. At 3 months, you take it down and you see that it looks just like a cranberry, like a real dense cranberry. It has a skin on it, similar to these skins. I mean, it's exactly these skins right here. Inside of that is like a pulp and a mucilage, similar to a grape. When you peel back the skin on the grape, there's that pulp and that mucilage in it. However, most of the time, the seeds in a grape are really, really small little things in there. Whereas in a coffee, the seeds inside is one big old seed, or technically two, sitting next to each other like this. That's what we want. So what we do is we depulp it. Through the fermentation process that naturally is going to happen to fruits when they're removed from the vine. They start to ferment, soften up, break down. We depulp it. We take the skins off. We take the pulp out. And our goal is to wash these beans down and these fruit cherries down to get to the beans in the middle. I only say that because if we can keep that on the shelf longer, grain, beans, and stuff like that, as opposed to the full plant that's going to start to rot, decompose, and so forth. So when we get these beans out of the inside of the cherry, we lay them out on these giant beds. And to this day, these giant beds, we just lay out all these beans and let the sun dry them out. Straight up. There's nothing complex from there. After we've depulped it, let it ferment, and we washed it clean, we just let it dry. And our goal is to dry that bean out till it's about 13 to 10% moisture, because that's just enough to where the bean won't rot over time. And then we ship those over to wherever the beans are going, whether this is coming from South Asia, East Africa, Central and South America, wherever they're coming from, we just ship it to where they're going. Once they get there, that's when things get interesting, you know. We could very much so try to take that bean and grind it up and make something out of it. But that's just, I would just assume it's just a little more viable if we cook that somehow. You know, just like we roast nuts, you know what I mean? We roast cacao. That's probably something really interesting to look into, how we got to the point of roasting it. But it would make a lot of sense we roast pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds, you know? It's probably that same philosophy. Nevertheless, once the bean goes through that whole mission, it comes to somebody like me. I get these green beans, these pale green beans that have 13% of the moisture that the fruit originally had in it. From that point, I am going to essentially put that bean in a rotisserie oven and start to cook it as hot and as fast as I can to not compromise the integrity of the bean, till that actual moisture inside of the bean evaporates. That's what happens when you heat up a liquid or water. It turns into gas, it expands. When it expands, the inside of the bean has to expand. So you hear a crack when you're roasting it. When that crack happens, that is that gas escaping the bean. At that point, coffee is technically servable. So at that point, we have a servable light roast, blonde roast, however you want to call it. That's what light roasted coffee is at that point. From there, I can darken it depending on what profile I think this product is going to serve best at. Some beans perform best as a medium roast. Some beans perform best as a dark roast. It really just depends on what notes and what purpose you're using that coffee for. There's a point a little bit further as you continue to heat the bean. It's called second crack. This is when you know you're into dark roast territory, and that any other moisture that's in that bean is gone at this point, and that escapes and cracks open. A lot of times you get Italian roast, French roast. These are usually dark roasted beans because when like the Dutch and when colonizers were going and getting these plants from the real tropical regions like Ethiopia, Central South America, and places that are naturally have high elevation and real vibrant atmospheres, usually warm, so much humidity in the atmosphere, it's like perfect for this fruit to thrive. When they took those out of those and tried to plant them in other places, they did not yield the same results as they were doing naturally where they came from. There was just no way for them to do that because the conditions weren't the same. So you were getting disease-ridden crops, you were getting young, immature, or they were tasting defects, insect damage, and all these things were happening to the beans. So what the French and Italian, we'll call them cultivators, were doing is they were roasting the coffee as dark as they could to where the defects wouldn't come through in the cup. So when you came to taste it, you couldn't taste that this had rust on it, or it had insect damage, or that it was, kind of a sour bean. Because at the end of the day, it just was what Western civilization made the taste of coffee, that standard of coffee, that dark, bold cup of mud, and why they always put cream and sugar in everything to mask the flavor. When essentially, as I told you from the very beginning, this was a berry that someone crushed up and made a tea-like drink from in the beginning. The antioxidants, the caffeine content, all the sweetness and how juicy it was naturally there. But because people were taking this crop from where it came from and trying to mass produce it or put it in places that it didn't belong, they had to burn it until they had something standard that they could push. So yeah, that's where somebody like me comes into play. As a coffee roaster, I get these beans from wherever I get them from. I test out different profiles. I'll roast it 3 different ways when I first get it. I'll taste each one, see which one I preferred the best, let some other people taste it, see how they preferred it, and then I find that happy medium of what we're going to use it for. And I think if everybody took that into consideration to see what coffee was, because I didn't even go into the fact that it takes an entire tree's worth of beans to make one 12-ounce to pound bag of coffee. And that means somebody's mama, somebody's daddy, somebody's brother or sister is outside picking these things to make that cup of coffee. So there's something on it, But yeah, man, coffee is interesting. And as you can see along that whole timeline and story, there's thousands and thousands of jobs, thousands and thousands of conversation. It's just industry in general. And roughly 12,000 years since this was discovered, coming from Africa, finally, I see people who are of African descent being in the forefront of that industry.